The stars had always called to humanity. For 300 years, they had answered that call, spreading across the galaxy like seeds carried by cosmic winds. They built colonies on distant worlds, forged alliances with peaceful species, and learned the ancient secrets of faster-than-light travel. But the universe was vast, and there were still corners of space that remained unexplored. Commander Jake Morrison stood at the center of the bridge, his hands clasped behind his back as he watched the main view screen. The blue-green planet rotating slowly before them was beautiful in a way that reminded him of Earth. Swirling white clouds drifted across its surface, and he could see the glittering lights of cities on the night side. This world was alive with civilization. "Initial scans are complete, Commander," said Katie Grant, his first officer. She was a tall woman with sharp eyes and steady hands, the kind of officer who never panicked even when everything went wrong. Population estimates suggest approximately 12 billion inhabitants. Their technology appears to be advanced but not as developed as ours. I'm detecting orbital stations, satellite networks, and what looks like a small fleet of warships in high orbit. Jake nodded slowly. The reconnaissance vessel Starbound Horizon had been mapping uncharted systems for 3 months. They had cataloged gas giants, discovered mineral-rich asteroid belts, and even found 2 planets suitable for future colonization. But this was different. This was first contact with an intelligent species. "Any response to our presence?" Jake asked. Lieutenant Ben Harris, who managed communications, shook his head. "Nothing yet, sir. But I'm picking up a lot of chatter on their frequencies. They've definitely noticed us." Jake took a deep breath. First contact protocols were clear. Humanity had learned, through both success and failure, that the best approach was always peaceful. They would introduce themselves, offer friendship, and hope for the best. But they would also be ready for the worst. "Open a channel," Jake said. "Broadcast on all standard frequencies. Let's say hello." Katie's fingers moved across her console, and a soft chime indicated the channel was open. Jake cleared his throat and spoke in a calm, friendly voice. "This is Commander Jake Morrison of the Earth vessel Starbound Horizon. We come in peace and with respect. We are explorers from a distant world called Earth, and we wish to establish friendly contact with your people. Please respond on any frequency." The message went out into the void, translated by the ship's computer into mathematical patterns that any intelligent species could decode. Then, they waited. The bridge was silent except for the soft hum of the ship's systems. Jake watched the planet turning below them, wondering what kind of beings lived there. Were they curious? Afraid? Hostile? In his 20 years of service, he had met species of all kinds. Some had welcomed humanity with open arms. Others had been suspicious but willing to talk. A few had tried to attack first and ask questions never. "Commander," Ben said suddenly, his voice tight with tension. "We're getting a response." The view screen flickered, and then an image appeared. Jake felt his eyebrows rise slightly. Though he kept his face otherwise calm, the being on the screen was tall and thin, with pale blue skin and 4 eyes arranged in a diamond pattern on its elongated face. It wore elaborate robes decorated with symbols that might have been military ranks or noble titles. "Unknown vessel," the being said, its voice cold and sharp. "You have entered space controlled by the Valorian Dominion. Identify yourself and state your purpose, or you will be destroyed." Jake noticed Katie's slight frown at the threat, but he simply smiled in what he hoped was a friendly manner. "Greetings," he said. "I am Commander Jake Morrison. As I said in my initial message, we are explorers from Earth. We mean no harm to your people or your territory. We were simply mapping this region of space and discovered your world. We would be honored to establish diplomatic relations with the Valorian Dominion." The alien's 4 eyes narrowed. "Earth? We have never heard of this world. You will power down your engines and prepare to be boarded for inspection. Your vessel and crew will be examined, and then we will decide what to do with you." Jake kept his smile in place, but his voice became slightly firmer. "I appreciate the offer, but I'm afraid I must decline. Our protocols don't allow for boarding by unknown parties. However, I would be happy to meet with your diplomatic representatives at a neutral location to discuss. You do not understand, the alien interrupted. The Valorian Dominion does not negotiate with inferior species. We have ruled this sector of space for 8,000 years. We have conquered dozens of worlds and brought countless species under our control. You will obey, or you will suffer the consequences. Jake exchanged a quick glance with Katie. She gave him a small shrug that said, "Here we go again." "I see," Jake said carefully. "Well, I respect your position, but humanity does not submit to demands made under threat. We are more than willing to be friends, but we will not be bullied. Perhaps we got off on the wrong foot. May I suggest we both take some time to consider our options, and then speak again in a more constructive manner?" The alien made a sound that might have been laughter, though it sounded more like rocks grinding together. "Foolish creatures. You sit in one small ship, alone and far from home, and you dare to refuse the Valorian Dominion? You have no idea what you are dealing with." The screen went dark. Jake stood motionless for a moment, then let out a long breath. "Well, that could have gone better." "They seem pleasant," Katie said dryly. "Commander," Ben called out, "I'm detecting multiple ships launching from the orbital stations, heading our way. At current speed, they'll reach us in approximately 40 minutes. Jake looked at the tactical display as red dots began to appear around the planet. He counted 10, then 20, then 30 ships moving toward them in a formation that was clearly meant to surround and trap. "Raise shields," he ordered calmly. "But keep weapons offline. We're not here to fight." "And if they force the issue?" Katie asked. Jake turned to look at the view screen, where the beautiful planet hung in the darkness of space. The Valorians had made a mistake that many species had made before them. They had looked at one small human ship and seen weakness. They had heard polite words and assumed fear. They had no idea what was coming. "If they force the issue," Jake said quietly, "then we'll show them why that's a very bad idea. But first, let's see if we can still make friends. Contact Earth. Tell them we have a situation." The Valorian warships moved through space, like predators circling wounded prey. Admiral Kethvos stood on the command deck of his flagship, the Dominion's Wrath, watching the tiny human vessel on his display screen. He had commanded fleets for over 200 years and had crushed rebellions on a dozen worlds. "This would be easy. Status report," he demanded. "The alien ship has raised some kind of energy barrier," his sensor officer reported. "But they have not powered their weapons. They appear to be waiting." Kethvos clicked his teeth together in amusement. "They are hoping we will show mercy. How pathetic. All ships, form attack formation. We will teach these creatures what happens to those who defy the Dominion." 40 warships arranged themselves in a sphere around the starward horizon, cutting off all possible escape routes. Each ship was armed with plasma cannons capable of melting through steel, and their combined firepower could reduce a small moon to rubble. Against one tiny exploration vessel, it was overwhelming force. On the starward horizon, Jake watched the enemy ships take position around them. The bridge was quiet but not afraid. His crew had trained for situations like this. They knew what their ship could do, and they knew that help was on the way. "Message sent to Earth, Commander," Ben reported. "Response should come through the quantum link within minutes." Katie studied her console with a thoughtful expression. "Their ships are impressive in number, but their technology is at least 2 centuries behind ours. Their weapons use basic plasma acceleration, and their shields appear to be simple electromagnetic barriers." "Which means?" Jake asked. "Which means if they attack us, they're going to be very surprised by the result." Engineer Laura Chen, a small woman with grease-stained hands and a brilliant mind, spoke up from her station. "Our shields are at full power, Commander. I've run the calculations. Their plasma weapons will be absorbed by our barrier and converted to energy. Every shot they fire at us will actually make us stronger." Jake almost smiled. Humanity had learned early in their expansion that the best defense was not to block attacks, but to turn enemy weapons against them. The shield technology aboard the Starward Horizon could absorb almost any form of directed energy and feed it directly into the ship's power systems. "Let's hope it doesn't come to that," Jake said. "But it's good to know." The view screen crackled, And Admiral Kethvos appeared again. His 4 eyes gleamed with cruel satisfaction as he looked down at Jake. "Human," he said, spitting the word like an insult. "You have had time to consider your situation. 40 of our warships surround you. There is no escape. Surrender now, and perhaps we will be merciful. Refuse, and we will reduce your vessel to dust and scatter your atoms across the void." Jake stood straight and met the alien's gaze without flinching. "Admiral, I understand you believe you're in a position of strength, but I would ask you to reconsider your approach. Humanity desires peace with the Valorian Dominion. We have no interest in conflict. But we also will not abandon our crew to unknown fate. Surely, there is a middle ground we can find." Kethvos laughed that grinding, unpleasant sound. "Middle ground? You speak of negotiation, as if you have something to bargain with. You are one ship. One. We are an empire that spans 1,000 stars. What could you possibly offer that we cannot simply take?" "Friendship," Jake said simply. "Partnership. The sharing of knowledge and culture. These are things that cannot be taken by force. They can only be given freely." The Admiral stared at him for a long moment, and Jake thought he saw something flicker in those 4 eyes. Confusion, perhaps, or curiosity. But then it was gone, replaced by cold contempt. "You speak like a fool," Kethvos declared. "The Dominion does not need friends. We need only obedience. This is your final warning. Surrender, or be destroyed." Jake took a deep breath. "Admiral, I'm going to give you a warning as well. We have contacted our government. They are aware of this situation. If you attack our vessel, you will be making an enemy of Earth. I strongly advise against that." "Your government?" The Admiral laughed again. "By the time any help arrives from your distant world, you will be long dead. We have heard such empty threats before from conquered species. It changes nothing." He raised his hand, ready to give the order to fire. "Commander," Ben said urgently. "Incoming transmission from Earth. It's from the Supreme Council." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. The Supreme Council did not get involved in minor incidents. For them to respond personally meant that this situation was being taken very seriously. "Put it through," he said. A new window opened on his display, showing a man with silver hair and calm, serious eyes. Council Speaker Nathan Webb was known throughout human space as a wise and patient leader, but also as someone who did not tolerate threats against humanity. "Commander Morrison," Webb said, "we have reviewed your situation. The Supreme Council has discussed the matter and reached a decision. You are to attempt peaceful resolution by any means possible. However, if hostile action continues against your vessel, you are authorized to initiate Protocol 7. Jake's heart beat faster. Protocol 7. He had heard of it, but he had never imagined he would be the one to use it. "Understood, Council Speaker," he said. "We will do everything we can to avoid escalation." "I know you will, Commander. Earth stands with you." Webb out. The transmission ended. Jake turned back to the main view screen, where Admiral Kethvos was still waiting with his hand raised. "Well?" the Admiral demanded. "Have you finished your pathetic calls for help? Are you ready to accept reality?" Jake looked at him with something almost like pity. "Admiral, I've just received orders from the Earth Supreme Council. They have authorized me to show you something. I'm asking you one last time. Please stand down, power down your weapons, and open diplomatic channels. There is still time to avoid what comes next." Kethvos snarled. "Enough of your delays. All ships, fire." The Valorian fleet opened up with everything they had. 40 ships launched streams of superheated plasma at the tiny human vessel. Enough firepower to crack a planet's crust. The plasma struck the starward horizon's shields and simply vanished. Absorbed. Converted. The ship didn't even shake. Laura Chen checked her readings and let out a low whistle. "They just charged our batteries by 12%. Katie looked at Jake with a raised eyebrow. "That was nice of them." On the Dominion's wrath, Admiral Kethvos stared at his display in disbelief. Impossible. Fire again. All ships. Maximum power. Another barrage. Another absorption. The human ship sat motionless in space, completely unharmed. Jake opened a channel to the Valorian flagship. Admiral, you have now committed an act of war against Earth. I gave you every opportunity to choose peace. You refused. Now I have no choice but to show you what Protocol 7 means. He nodded to Katie. She pressed a single button on her console, and across the star system, the fabric of space itself began to tear open. Admiral Kethvos had seen many things in his 200 years of military service. He had watched planets burn. He had commanded fleets that darkened the skies of conquered worlds. He had stood in victory over species that had once believed themselves powerful. Nothing had ever frightened him, until now. The tears in space appeared without warning. They started as small points of light, like distant stars flickering to life. Then they grew, expanding into swirling portals of energy that crackled with power beyond anything Valorian science could explain. One portal, then 10, then 50, then 100. What is happening? Kethvos demanded, gripping the railing of his command deck so hard his knuckles turned white. His sensor officer was shaking. Admiral, I'm detecting massive energy signatures emerging from the anomalies. Ships. Hundreds of ships. They're enormous. The first vessel emerged from the nearest portal, and Kethvos felt his breath catch in his throat. It was a warship of impossible size, easily 15 kilometers long. Its hull was sleek and dark, covered with weapons arrays that glowed with contained power. Behind it came another ship, and another, and another. The portals continued to open. 200, 250, 300. From each one emerged vessels of war that made the Valorian fleet look like children's toys. Dreadnoughts bristling with weapons, carrier ships large enough to hold thousands of fighters, support vessels and destroyers and cruisers of every size, all bearing the same symbol on their hulls, a blue circle with a single white star. And at the center of this vast armada, something even larger emerged. It was not a ship. It was a station, a mobile fortress, the size of a small moon. Its surface was covered with docking bays and weapon platforms and sensor arrays. It moved through space with the slow, unstoppable grace of a glacier. And its presence filled the view screen like a god descending from heaven. The Unity's light, Kethvos whispered, reading the name painted in massive letters across the station's hull. What have we done? On the starward horizon, Jake watched the arrival of the 3rd Expeditionary Fleet with a mixture of relief and sadness. He had hoped to avoid this. He had tried so hard to find a peaceful solution, but the Valorians had left him no choice. The fleet is in position, Katie reported. All ships confirm ready status. The Unity's light is hailing the Valorian flagship. Jake nodded. Let's see how they respond to someone their own size. The main view screen changed, showing a split image. On one side was the bridge of the Valorian flagship, where Admiral Kethvos stood frozen in shock. On the other side was the command center of the Unity's light, where Supreme Admiral Chris Bennett sat in a chair that looked more like a throne. Bennett was an older man with a shaved head and eyes that had seen too many battles. He had spent his entire life in service to Earth, rising through the ranks to become one of the most respected military leaders in human history. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of absolute authority. Admiral Kethvos of the Valorian Dominion, Bennett said. I am Supreme Admiral Chris Bennett of the Earth Supreme Council's 3rd Expeditionary Fleet. Your forces have committed an unprovoked attack against one of our vessels. This is an act of war. Kethvos tried to speak, but no words came out. His mouth opened and closed like a fish pulled from water. Around him, his bridge crew was in chaos. Officers shouting readings and trying to make sense of what was happening. I want you to understand something, Bennett continued, his voice calm and cold. The fleet you see before you is not our entire military. It is not even a significant portion of our military. It is simply the force we had available in this region of space. We could have sent more, but we felt this would be sufficient to make our point. He leaned forward slightly, Humanity has existed among the stars for 300 years. In that time, we have encountered many species. Some were friendly, some were hostile. The hostile ones are now our allies. Do you understand what I'm telling you? Kethvos finally found his voice. This is impossible. No species could build a fleet this size in only 3 centuries. Your technology. It's beyond anything we've ever seen. How? Bennett allowed himself a small smile. Humans are very good at 2 things, Admiral. Making friends and making war. We prefer the former, but we excel at the latter when forced. You see, we learned long ago that the universe is dangerous, so we prepared. We built. We advanced. Not because we wanted to conquer anyone, but because we wanted to ensure that no one could ever threaten our people. He gestured at the fleet surrounding the Valorian ships. This is what 300 years of preparation looks like. 300 years of the brightest minds from 100 worlds working together to build something that could never be challenged. 300 years of hoping we would never have to use it. On the Dominion's wrath, sensor alarms were screaming. Officer after officer reported the same thing. The human weapons were locked onto their ships. At any moment, the fleet could open fire, and there would be nothing they could do to stop it. Admiral, one of his officers said, his voice trembling. Their weapons, our shields cannot withstand them. If they fire, we will be destroyed in seconds. Kethvos stared at the view screen, at the endless rows of human warships that surrounded his fleet. 8,000 years. The Valorian Dominion had ruled for 8,000 years, and they had never encountered anything like this. They had believed themselves to be the masters of space, the supreme power in the galaxy. They had been wrong. What do you want? Kethvos asked, his voice barely a whisper. Bennett's expression softened slightly. We want what we have always wanted, Admiral. Peace. Friendship. The opportunity to learn from each other and grow together. We did not come here to conquer you or destroy you. We came here because you attacked our ship and threatened our people. All we ask is that you stand down, open diplomatic channels, and give us a chance to show you that there is a better way than war. Kethvos looked around his bridge at the frightened faces of his crew. These were warriors who had never known defeat. Now they stared at destruction made manifest, and they understood for the first time what it meant to face a power greater than themselves. And if we refuse? Kethvos asked. Bennett's eyes hardened. Then you will discover why every aggressive species we've encountered has chosen to become our ally rather than our enemy. But I hope it doesn't come to that. Admiral, I truly do. We have enough allies. We don't need any more enemies. The communication ended, leaving Kethvos standing alone with his thoughts. Behind him, his officers waited for orders. Around him, the human fleet waited with patient menace. Below him, his homeworld waited to learn their fate. He had a choice to make, the same choice that so many species had faced before him when they encountered humanity for the first time: surrender and live, or fight and die. For the first time in his long life, Admiral Kethvos realized that he was afraid. High Counselor Zethron stood before the great window of his palace, watching the night sky above the Valorian homeworld. For 8,000 years, his ancestors had looked up at those same stars and seen an empire. They had seen conquered worlds and subjugated species and endless expansion. They had seen power and glory and eternal dominion. Now, Zethran looked up and saw something else entirely. He saw the tiny lights of human warships, hundreds of them, arranged in perfect formation around his planet. He saw the massive shape of the Unity's light, blocking out an entire section of stars. He saw the end of everything he had ever known. High Counselor, said one of his advisors, bowing low. Admiral Kethvos awaits your orders. He asks what he should do. Zethran continued to stare at the sky. What can he do? You saw the reports. Our entire fleet could fire every weapon they have, and it would not scratch a single one of those ships. We built our empire on strength. Now we have met something stronger. The advisor shifted nervously. There are some who say we should fight anyway. Die with honor rather than surrender to these humans. Honor. Zethran repeated the word like it tasted bitter. What is honor worth when your entire species is dead? No. We will not fight. We cannot fight. These humans have shown us a truth we should have learned long ago. There is always someone stronger. He turned away from the window and walked to his communication terminal. With a heavy heart, he opened a channel to Admiral Kethvos. Admiral, you will stand down immediately. Power down all weapons and lower your shields. Signal our surrender. There was a long pause before Kethvos responded. High Counselor, are you certain? Our warriors are prepared to fight to the death. And they would die, Zethran said flatly. Every single one of them. And then the humans would turn their attention to our worlds. And our people would die too. I will not sacrifice our species for pride. Signal the surrender. That is my final order. On the bridge of the Dominion's wrath, Admiral Kethvos closed his eyes for a moment. 200 years of victory. And it ended like this. Not in glorious battle, but in shameful submission. But even as he felt the sting of defeat, he also felt something unexpected. Relief. He had seen the human fleet's weapons. He had read the reports of their technology. If they had wanted to destroy the Valorians, they could have done so already. Instead, they had simply waited. Maybe surrender was not the worst thing that could happen. All ships, Kethvos announced, his voice steady despite everything. Power down weapons. Lower shields. Transmit surrender codes on all frequencies. The Valorian Dominion stands down. Across the star system, the Valorian fleet went dark. Weapon systems shut down. Shields flickered and faded. 40 warships hung motionless in space, completely vulnerable to the armada that surrounded them. On the starward horizon, Jake let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. They're surrendering. Katie nodded, checking her displays. Confirmed. All Valorian ships have powered down. They're transmitting universal surrender codes. Thank God. Jake murmured. He had hoped for this outcome, but he hadn't been sure it would happen. The Valorians had seemed so arrogant, so certain of their own power, but faced with overwhelming force, they had made the smart choice. A new transmission came through from the Unity's light. Supreme Admiral Bennett appeared on screen, and this time his expression was almost warm. Well done, Commander Morrison, Bennett said. You handled that situation exactly right. You gave them every chance to avoid this confrontation. When they forced your hand, you called for help. And when help arrived, you let us handle the heavy lifting. That's good leadership. Jake shook his head. I just wish it hadn't come to this. They seemed like they could be good people, under all that arrogance. They just didn't know any other way. Bennett nodded thoughtfully. That's often the case with aggressive species. They've spent so long conquering others that they've forgotten how to cooperate. They see the universe as a competition where only the strongest survive. It takes a shock like this to make them realize there's another way. What happens now? Jake asked. Now we talk, Bennett said. We send diplomats. We negotiate treaties. We show them that being our friend is better than being our enemy. It won't happen overnight. They have 8,000 years of history telling them that strength is everything. But humans are patient. We can teach them. On the Valorian homeworld, Zethran watched as a small shuttle descended from orbit. It bore the symbol of Earth, the blue circle with the white star. Inside would be human diplomats, coming to discuss terms of peace. He had expected to feel anger or shame. Instead, he felt only curiosity. These humans were strange creatures. They had the power to destroy his entire civilization. Yet they chose to talk instead. They had been attacked and threatened, yet they responded with offers of friendship. In 8,000 years, the Valorians had never encountered a species like this. The shuttle landed in the courtyard of his palace, and a ramp extended from its side. The first to emerge was a human female, smaller than Zethran had expected. She had brown hair and kind eyes, and she walked with the confident grace of someone who feared nothing. High Counselor Zethran, she said, bowing slightly in greeting. "I am Ambassador Megan Torres of Earth. I'm here to discuss the future relationship between our peoples." Zethran studied her carefully. She showed no fear, no arrogance, no sign of the triumphant conqueror. She simply smiled at him, as if meeting an old friend. "You have defeated us," Zethran said slowly. "You could make any demands you wish. Why do you come here speaking of relationships and futures?" Megan's smile grew warmer. "Because that's not who we are, High Counselor. Humanity learned a long time ago that empires built on conquest always fall. Species that rule through fear eventually face rebellion. The only way to truly thrive in this universe is through cooperation and mutual respect." She gestured at the sky, where the lights of the human fleet were still visible. "Yes, we have the power to destroy you. But we also have the power to help you, to share our technology, our knowledge, our experience. We've met dozens of species out there among the stars, and we've made friends with almost all of them. Each friendship has made us stronger and better." Zethran was silent for a long moment, processing her words. Everything he had been taught, everything he had believed, told him that this was impossible. The strong conquered the weak. That was the way of the universe. But here stood a human, offering something different. Offering partnership instead of subjugation. Offering a hand instead of a weapon. "Why?" Zethran asked finally. "Why would you help us after what we did? We attacked your ship. We threatened your people. Any other species would seek revenge." Megan's expression became serious. "Because revenge doesn't build anything, High Counselor. It only destroys. Humanity has made that mistake before. Many times in our history, we've learned that the cycle of violence only ends when someone chooses to break it." She took a step closer to him. "We could have destroyed your fleet today. We could destroy your entire civilization tomorrow. But what would that accomplish? More death? More fear? More species who see us as monsters to be avoided? No, we'd rather have allies who trust us, friends who stand beside us, partners who make us all stronger together." Zethran looked into her eyes and saw something he had never expected to see in the face of a conqueror. Sincerity. She meant every word she was saying. For the first time in 8,000 years, the Valorian Dominion had encountered a power they could not fight. And for the first time, they began to wonder if maybe, just maybe, they didn't want to. 1 week had passed since the human fleet arrived in Valorian space. 7 days that had changed everything the Valorian people believed about themselves and the universe. 7 days that had rewritten 8,000 years of history. High Counselor Zethran sat in his council chamber, surrounded by the leaders of his civilization. Admirals and generals, scientists and philosophers, governors from every major colony world. They had gathered to hear the terms of the treaty that Ambassador Torres had negotiated, and the mood was tense with anticipation. Zethran looked down at the document in his hands. It was written in both human and Valorian script, a symbol of the new partnership being forged. He had read it dozens of times, searching for the trap, the hidden clause that would enslave his people. He had found nothing. "The terms are simple," he announced to the assembled leaders. "Earth and the Valorian Dominion will establish full diplomatic relations. Trade routes will be opened between our territories. Scientists and scholars will be exchanged to share knowledge and research. Neither side will engage in aggressive military action against the other." He paused, looking around the room. "That is all. No demands for territory. No tributes or taxes. No subjugation of our people. They ask only for peace and partnership." Admiral Kethvos, who had been allowed to remain in command despite his failure, spoke up. "It cannot be that simple. They have us at their mercy. Why would they not press their advantage? Because they do not want conquest?" Zethran replied. "I have spent the past week talking with Ambassador Torres and her staff. I have studied their history, their culture, their philosophy. The humans are unlike any species we have encountered. They have the power to dominate the galaxy, but they choose not to use it." A murmur of disbelief rippled through the council. One of the generals, a veteran of 100 campaigns, stood and spoke harshly. "Forgive me, High Counselor, but this sounds like propaganda. Every species in the universe desires power. It is the fundamental nature of intelligent life. These humans must have some hidden agenda." Zethran had expected this reaction. He gestured to an aide, who activated a display screen. Images appeared, showing human ships delivering supplies to distant worlds, human doctors treating sick aliens in crowded hospitals, human engineers building infrastructure on planets they had never visited before. "These are records from species the humans have contacted over the past 3 centuries, Zethran explained. The Torvalian Union, the Mesh Collective, the Drini Alliance. All of them were once hostile to humanity. All of them attacked human vessels or threatened human colonies, and all of them are now close allies of Earth." He pointed to the images. The humans did not crush them. They did not enslave them. They reached out with friendship and showed them a better way. Today, these species stand with humanity as equals, their cultures preserved, their freedoms protected. The council fell silent, watching the images scroll across the screen. They showed scenes that would have been unthinkable in Valorian history. Powerful species cooperating instead of competing, sharing resources instead of fighting over them, celebrating each other's achievements instead of fearing them. "I have read the reports from our scientists," Zethran continued. "They have analyzed the human technology, and they are both terrified and amazed. The humans could have developed weapons capable of destroying entire star systems. Instead, they built tools for healing and creation. Their medical technology can cure diseases we considered incurable. Their agricultural systems can feed billions without damaging the environment. Their construction methods can build cities in months instead of decades." He set down the treaty and looked at his people with eyes that had been opened to new possibilities. "For 8,000 years, we have defined strength as the ability to destroy. We have measured our worth by how many worlds we conquered, how many species we dominated. But the humans have shown us a different kind of strength." Standing, Zethran walked to the great window that overlooked the capital city. In the distance, he could see a human ship hovering in the sky, not as a threat but as a symbol of the new relationship being built. "True strength is not the power to destroy," he said quietly. "It is the power to build. It is the wisdom to choose creation over destruction. It is the courage to offer friendship to enemies who might refuse it. The humans have this strength, and they are offering to teach it to us." He turned back to face the council. "I know this is difficult to accept. I know it goes against everything we have been taught. But I have seen the truth with my own eyes. The Valorian Dominion can continue down the path of conquest and eventually meet an enemy we cannot defeat. Or we can accept the hand that humanity is offering and become something greater than we have ever been." The vote was called. It was not unanimous, but it was decisive. The treaty was ratified, and the Valorian Dominion officially became an ally of Earth. In the weeks that followed, human ships began arriving at Valorian worlds. Not warships, but cargo vessels and medical frigates and science ships. They brought teachers and doctors and engineers, all eager to share their knowledge with their new friends. Ambassador Megan Torres stood on a balcony in the High Counselor's palace, watching the sun set over the Valorian capital. The sky was painted in shades of orange and purple, and the lights of the city were beginning to flicker on below. Zethran joined her, his tall form casting a long shadow across the stone floor. "Your people are remarkable, Ambassador. In just a few weeks, they have begun to transform our society." Megan smiled. "We've had a lot of practice. You're not the first species to underestimate us, and you won't be the last." "I have been wondering something," Zethran said slowly. "When your Commander Morrison first contacted us, he was polite and friendly. Even when we threatened him, he remained calm. Even when we fired upon his ship, he did not retaliate. Why? He must have known that his ship could have defeated our entire fleet." Crising, Megan turned to look at him, her expression thoughtful. "Because violence is easy, High Counselor. Any species can learn to fight. Any civilization can build weapons, but it takes real strength to stay your hand when you have every right to strike. Commander Morrison knew that destroying your ships would have ended any chance of peace. He chose to risk his life for the possibility of friendship. She looked back at the sunset. Humanity has not always been wise. Our history is full of wars and conflicts, terrible mistakes that cost millions of lives. But we learned from those mistakes. We realized that the cycle of violence leads nowhere good, so we made a choice. We would be strong enough that no one could threaten us, but wise enough to use that strength only when absolutely necessary. Zethran was silent for a long moment, processing her words. Then he spoke quietly. When I was young, I was taught that the universe was a competition, that every species was fighting for survival, and only the strongest would endure. But you have shown me a different truth. Cooperation is more powerful than competition. Friendship is more valuable than conquest. He turned to face her directly. I do not know if my people can fully embrace this philosophy. 8,000 years of history are not easily forgotten. But I promise you this. I will spend the rest of my life trying to help them understand. You have given us a gift, Ambassador. The gift of a new future. Megan reached out and placed her hand on his arm. A gesture of connection between two species who had been enemies just days before. That's all we can ask, High Counselor. Change takes time, but as long as you're willing to try, we'll be here to help. The sun slipped below the horizon, and the stars began to appear in the darkening sky. Among them, barely visible, were the lights of human ships keeping watch over their newest friends. They would remain there for years to come. A reminder of the power that humanity possessed and the wisdom with which they used it. In the grand story of the galaxy, this was just one chapter. One species among many who had learned the lesson that humanity had to teach. But it was an important chapter nonetheless, because the most powerful species in the galaxy was not the one with the biggest ships or the deadliest weapons. It was the one that had learned when not to use them, and that lesson, shared across 1,000 worlds and 1,000,000 stars, was humanity's greatest gift to the universe.